You're 52. It's a Tuesday morning. You open your laptop, coffee in one hand, anxiety in the other. You type something you've typed 100 times before. Am I on track for retirement? The calculator loads. You enter your savings, your age, your income. And then it tells you you need $1.4 million. You stare at the screen. You have $320,000. And suddenly everything feels wrong. The vacations you took, the car you bought, the years you didn't max out your 401k. You close the tab, but the number doesn't leave. It follows you to work. It sits with you at dinner. It shows up at 2 a.m. because now you're behind. Here's the problem. If that number is real, then almost everyone in America is failing, not a little, massively. Because the actual data shows something very different. The median retirement savings for Americans between 65 and 74 is about $200,000. Not the average, the median. Which means half of all retirees have less than that. And yet, most of them are not moving in with their kids. Most of them rate their retirement satisfaction at 8 out of 10 or higher. So now you have a contradiction. On one side, you're told you need over $1 million. On the other, millions of people are retiring with a fraction of that. And they're fine. Not perfect, but fine. So either 90% of retirees are quietly struggling and lying about it, or the number you've been given is wrong. To understand this, you need to understand how that number was created, because it didn't come from nowhere. It came from a very specific system with a very specific incentive. Think about the last time you went to buy a car. There's a number printed on the window, MSRP. It looks official, non-negotiable, but almost nobody actually pays it. There are discounts, dealer incentives, end of quarter deals. The real price is almost always lower, but the sticker stays there because it anchors your expectations. It makes every other price feel like a deal. Retirement works the same way. The $1.4 million number is the sticker price. It's not what most people actually pay. It's what you're meant to believe you should. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. The entire financial industry makes money based on how much you have invested. Assets under management. If you have $200,000, they earn a fee on that. If you have $1 million, they earn 5 times as much. Same percentage. Much bigger revenue. So the system has a built-in incentive to make the target bigger. Not because anyone is sitting in a room plotting against you, but because the structure rewards it. And once you see that, a lot of things start to make sense. Why every calculator gives you a huge number. Why every article says you're behind. Why every milestone feels just out of reach. But the biggest issue isn't the number itself. It's the way you've been taught to think about it. Because you've been asking the wrong question. You think the retirement question is, how much do I have saved? It's not. The real question is, how much income do I need every month? And more importantly, how much of that income is already covered? Those are completely different questions, and they lead to completely different answers. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine 2 people. Both have $300,000 saved. On paper, they look identical, but the first person has a paid-off home, no debt, and receives $2,500 a month from Social Security. The second person is still paying a mortgage, has higher expenses, and only receives $1,200 a month. Same savings, completely different realities. Because retirement isn't about how big your savings pile is. It's about the gap between your income and your expenses. This is what I call the 2-pile system. Pile 1 is guaranteed income. Social Security, pensions, anything that shows up every month, no matter what the market does. Pile 2 is your savings, your 401k, your IRA, your investments. Most of the conversation focuses entirely on pile 2 because that's what can be measured, managed, and charged fees on. But your actual life is determined by the relationship between both. Let's take a real example. A woman retires at 68. She has $180,000 saved. By traditional standards, she's in trouble. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that's about $600 a month. That doesn't sound like a retirement, but that's not the full picture. She also receives $2,100 a month from Social Security. A small pension adds another $400. Her home is fully paid off, so her total monthly income is about $3,100. Her expenses? Around $2,600. She's not struggling. She's not barely surviving. She's cash flow positive. The system said she needed close to $1 million. She made it work with less than $200,000. That gap is the retirement lie. Now let's talk about why this affects you so much, because the most dangerous part of this system isn't the math, it's the psychology. When you believe you're behind, you behave differently. You panic when markets drop, because every loss feels like something you can't afford. You play it too safe, because risk feels dangerous. You avoid looking at your finances altogether, because it feels uncomfortable. And ironically, those behaviours make your outcome worse. There's a strange pattern researchers have found. People who feel financially behind tend to make worse long-term decisions. Not because they're less intelligent, but because they're under pressure. And pressure changes behaviour. Let me introduce you to someone. We'll call him Dave. Dave is 52. He's been saving consistently for years. He has about $380,000 in his 401k. He earns a decent income. He's done almost everything right. But Dave feels behind because every article he reads tells him he should have more. He skipped a family vacation 2 years ago to catch up. He checks his portfolio constantly. Every market dip feels like a threat. But here's what happens when you actually run Dave's numbers. His projected Social Security is about $2,300 a month. His wife adds another $950. That's over $3,200 in guaranteed income. By retirement, his mortgage will be gone. His expenses drop significantly. Let's say he needs around $4,700 a month to live comfortably. That leaves a gap of about $1,500 per month, or roughly $18,000 per year. Using a conservative withdrawal rate, Dave needs around $450,000 in savings to cover that gap. He already has $380,000, and he has over a decade left to invest. Even if he stopped contributing today and just let it grow, he would likely end up with far more than he needs. Dave isn't behind. Dave is ahead. But the system made him feel like he was failing, and that feeling cost him something real: time, experiences, peace of mind. There's a quiet cost to believing you're behind. It doesn't show up on a statement, but it compounds over time. People work longer than they need to, delay things that matter, live more cautiously than necessary, all to reach a number that may not even apply to them. So what's the alternative? You flip the question. Instead of asking, how much do I need to save? You ask, what income do I already have? What do I actually spend? And what gap needs to be filled? That gap is your real number. For some people, it's $150,000. For others, it's $800,000. But it's never a universal number. And it's never the sticker price. Because retirement isn't a status game. It's a coverage problem. And once you see it that way, something shifts. You stop chasing a number and start understanding your life. You realize that more money isn't always the answer. Better structure is. And maybe the most important part is this. The goal was never to die with the biggest account balance. The goal was to build a life that your money can support, not impress, not maximize. Support. And somewhere right now, someone like Dave is opening that same retirement calculator again. But this time, he's not asking, am I behind? He's asking, what do I actually need? And for the first time in years, the answer feels manageable. Not because the math changed, but because the question did. And once you see that, you start noticing something else. The system doesn't just give you a number, it gives you a feeling, a very specific one. You're not safe yet, not enough, keep going. And that feeling is incredibly profitable because it keeps you in the game longer. There's a quiet pattern that happens to a lot of people. They get close to retirement, they've saved consistently, they've done what they were told, but when they finally ask, "Am I ready?" the answer is almost always the same. 1 more year. So they work 1 more year, then they ask again and again. 1 more year. This can repeat for a decade, and nobody tracks what that costs because it's not on a spreadsheet. It's time, health, energy, moments that don't come back. The system measures money very precisely, but it doesn't measure life at all. And that's where the real distortion happens. Because if you zoom out, retirement isn't actually about money. It's about control over your time. Money is just the tool. But when the tool becomes the focus, you lose sight of what it was meant to build. Let's go back to the numbers for a second, because this part matters. You've probably heard of the 4% rule. The idea that you can withdraw 4% of your savings each year without running out of money. It's simple and useful, but also incomplete, because it assumes something very important that often isn't true. It assumes your savings are your primary source of income. But for most Americans, that's not the case. Social Security alone, for an average worker, can be anywhere between $1,800 to $2,500 per month. For a couple, that's often $3,500 to $4,500 combined. That's not a small number, that's a foundation. If you try to replicate that income with investments alone, you'd need close to $1 million. But Social Security doesn't show up in your portfolio balance. So psychologically, it feels like it doesn't count, even though it might be the most stable income you'll ever have. And this is where most retirement advice quietly breaks down. It either ignores guaranteed income or treats it like a side note, which makes the savings target look much larger than it actually needs to be. It's like calculating how much food you need for a week and ignoring everything already in your fridge. Of course the number looks huge, but it's not reality. It's an incomplete equation. And incomplete equations lead to bad decisions. There's another layer to this, one that doesn't get talked about enough. The difference between average and median. You'll often hear that the average retirement savings is around $600,000. That sounds decent, encouraging even. But averages can be misleading because they get pulled up by a small number of very wealthy people. The median, the true middle, is much lower, around $200,000. That's the reality for a typical retiree. And yet, many of those people report being satisfied, not because they're secretly rich, but because their income and their lifestyle are aligned. That's the part no one emphasizes. Alignment, not maximization. You don't need the highest number, you need the right structure. And once you understand that, you start to see the trap more clearly. The trap isn't that people don't save enough. It's that they're trying to solve the wrong problem. They're chasing a number instead of designing a system. And those are very different things. A number is static. A system is flexible. A number doesn't adapt to your life. A system does. And retirement isn't a single moment. It's a phase, one that can last 20, 30, even 40 years, which means the goal isn't just to arrive there, it's to sustain it comfortably without constant stress, without second guessing every expense, without feeling like one bad year in the market could undo everything. And that only happens when your foundation is strong, not when your savings number is big. There's a simple way to think about this. Your retirement plan should answer one question clearly. If I stop working tomorrow, what pays for my life? If the answer is unclear, no amount of savings will feel like enough. If the answer is clear, even a modest amount can feel sufficient. That's the difference. Clarity. And clarity doesn't come from chasing bigger numbers. It comes from understanding the structure, your income, your expenses, your gap. That's it. Everything else is noise. And once you remove that noise, something interesting happens. The anxiety starts to fade. Not completely, but enough. Enough to think clearly. Enough to make better decisions. Enough to live without constantly feeling like you're behind. Because maybe you were never behind. Maybe you were just measuring yourself against the wrong benchmark. A benchmark that was never designed for you. And once you step outside of it, you realise something simple. Retirement isn't a number you reach. It's a balance you create between income and spending, between security and flexibility, between today and tomorrow. And if you get that balance right, the exact number starts to matter a lot less. Because at the end of all of this, that's what you're really trying to build. Not the biggest account, but a life that your money can quietly support without fear, without pressure, without constantly asking, is it enough? And maybe the real lie was never about the number. It was about what you thought the number meant, because it was never a finish line. It was just a suggestion, and you were always allowed to question it.